Part 2. When Jake awoke, he was lying on something soft. It was unfamiliar. It definitely didn't feel like his bed. His body was still sore. The last thing he remembered was getting thrown against the fence and the millisecond of unimaginable pain that followed. I must be in the hospital. Yes, that's it. Someone found me and called an ambulance. That must be why. Why is the ceiling so far away? It was the first time he'd noticed this odd detail. Lying on his back, he couldn't see around him. He decided to sit up and examine his surroundings, and got the shock of his life. The room he was in was big, enormous, unbelievably, mind-bogglingly huge. It was the biggest room he'd ever seen, and that wasn't all. Everything else inside it was also gigantic. Windows, curtains, chairs, doors. The pillow he was lying on was 40 feet long and 20 feet wide. It was in turn lying on an even more enormous table, with a massive flower pot containing not flowers, but small trees. He couldn't see the floor, but it got a sickening feeling that it was very, very far below him. And there in the corner of the room was a bed. It was 110 feet long at least, and on it lay a truly colossal person. It was a girl. She looked a little younger than him, with a pretty face and a nice-looking body, but her size was just wrong. She must be bigger than a whale, thought Jake, unable to believe what he was seeing. Then, trying to make sense of it, he came to the conclusion that he was dreaming. I gotta wake up. I gotta escape this nightmare. He pinched himself hard. Nothing happened. He slapped himself a couple times on the face. It hurt, but still, nothing changed around him. Then he began to really get scared. His breathing became more panicky, and he let out a moan of despair, immediately regretting he'd done so. The giant girl on the bed had heard him. She stood up and came walking towards him. With every step she took, she grew larger and larger in Jake's eyes. Her pink top covered a big torso big enough for him to live in. Jake began searching for an escape route. The pillow was 5 feet above the tabletop, and he leapt off of it without even looking. And that's as far as he got. There was no way to get off the round table. He scurried around the edge, searching in vain for a way down, and while trying to avoid the giantess on the other side. Suddenly, the sound of giggling reached his ears. He looked up, and there was the giant girl's face, her hand over her mouth, trying to suppress her laughter. Jake sat down, closed his eyes, and began saying over and over, "This can't be real. It's just a dream. It can't be real. It's a dream. It's a dream." As he talked to himself, he heard a gentle but powerful voice say, "Oh no, don't cry. Don't cry, little man. I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to be your friend. Sorry I laughed at you, but you look so funny running around like that. I never wanted to scare you, I promise. Please don't cry." Susan looked at the tiny figure of the boy, cowering on her table, and felt sorry for him. It had seemed like a good idea to bring him there, take care of his wounds, maybe give him some food and water. Now she wasn't so sure. Seeing her seems to have scared him out of his wits. She wanted to take him back and let him go, but a new problem became clear. What if he told everyone in town about her? All her father's hard work in keeping her existence secret would be undone, thanks to her thoughtlessness. She tried to talk to the boy again. "Listen, I'm really sorry I frightened you, but you have to believe me. I mean you no harm. My name is Susan. Susan Adams. But everyone calls me Susie. This is where I live here, in this house. I know my size can be a little, well, scary, but that's just the way I am. I wish I was normal like you, though. Then I wouldn't have to stand here and explain these things to you, and you wouldn't feel afraid of me for no reason. There was still no reaction from Jake. He remained in a sitting, curled-up position, his face hidden in his arms. Susan gave up talking to him and sat down at the table. She sighed and wished for the billionth time she didn't have to be like this. After a long while, Jake found the courage to stand up and look at his captor. When she saw him do this, she extended her hand towards him. He backed away quickly. "Don't touch me!" he screamed. "Don't touch me, you freak! Let me go now!" Susan sighed again. "How can I let you go if I'm not allowed to touch you?" she asked, her patience growing thin. Jake looked around him, trying to find an answer. He got none. "That's right," she said. "You're trapped on my table. It's 50 feet to the floor, and there's no way down. If you want to get home, you have to let me help you. That's what you want, isn't it? To go home?" Jake thought for a moment before answering. "Fine," he shouted. "Just get me down, okay? Get me down and leave me alone." "Oh, I'll leave you, all right. I'll just leave you on my floor and forget about you. I mean, you obviously know the way home, don't you? And how to get over the fence, of course. I'm sure you know exactly how to do that." Susan didn't mean to yell at him, but her frustration was becoming too much to handle. It did have an effect on Jake, though. He stared at her in silence, before feebly uttering the word, "Fence?" "Yes, you dimwit. The fence that surrounds my house to keep people away from me. The one which you nearly got yourself killed. The one I had to reach over to pick you up, because I thought you were badly hurt. And I wanted to help you, only to find you're the kind of guy who instantly hates someone like me because I'm different. That fence." Jake fell to his knees and felt like fainting. The way she shouted at him had been terrifying. He wondered if she was going to kill him. Quietly, he began to pray. Suddenly, he was caught between two massive fingers. Susan gripped him on either side of his chest. Slowly, she lifted his trembling body and dropped him into her other hand. He curled up into a tiny ball and began to sob. "I'm taking you home, okay?" she said softly. "I hate seeing you like this. All I wanted was to help you, make friends with you, get to know you. I get so lonely out here, and some company would have been nice. But it's your decision, not mine. Come, let's get you home." She went outside and headed in the direction in which she'd found him. By now it was getting late, and the sun was low in the western sky. When she got to the fence, she put the still sobbing Jake down carefully on the other side. She watched him jump up and run in the direction of his useless bike. He climbed on it, then remembered the flat tires. Swearing to himself, he began pushing the bike ahead of him when he heard a voice call out behind him. "Goodbye." He turned and saw the giant girl standing behind the fence, which looked small and flimsy beside her towering legs. She was looking back at him, and to his surprise, there were tears in her eyes. "Snap out of it," he told himself, and without another glance back, began hurrying down the dirt path back towards town. He had not got 20 yards when it hit him. "What am I doing?" he thought. "How could I have been so stupid? I just screwed up my only chance to make a friend in this shitty town. Now she thinks I hate her, and..." Without a second thought, he dropped his bike and began to run back. When he reached the fence, there was no sign of her. He began to shout frantically. Hey, hey, Susie, Susie, it's me. Come back. Susie, I'm sorry. At first, nothing happened. Then the group of trees closest to him began moving. The nearest one was pushed over, and there was Susan, looking down at him, her eyes still teary. Jake got his thoughts together and began speaking. Susie? It is Susie, right? Well, I just wanted to say sorry for the way I acted and for shouting at you and everything, and for calling you a freak. That was wrong with me. I'm really sorry. So, yeah, well, that's it, I guess. Please forgive me. He couldn't look her in the eyes, so he gazed at her feet. She knelt down behind the fence and reached for him with her hand. This time he didn't back away, and laid her fingers against his back. Sniffling back her tears, she smiled and said, "Apology accepted." "So," said Jake, breaking the silence, "I guess this is goodbye. I mean, I'd love to come and visit you again, but..." "You would?" she asked excitedly. "You'd really come and see me? Oh, please come and see me again. I'd love to have a friend like you. I really would." Okay," he said, rather taken aback. When can I come back? Can I call you or something?" "No, I don't have a phone," she sighed. "Easy to guess why, huh? But I'm free tomorrow, the whole day. Just come back to this spot. I'll wait for you here. Then I can take you to my home." "Well, I have to go to church tomorrow morning, so how about I come at 12 o'clock noon? I'll tell my mom I'm going for a ride in the forest. She won't suspect anything." 12 o'clock? That's perfect." "Oh no, I forgot. Your bicycle, isn't it broken?" "My bike? Nah, just a couple flat tires. I can fix them tonight." "Anyway, I have something to ask you. Come back tomorrow. Then I'll tell you all about me." She smiled again. "It's a long story, believe me. But there is something I want to ask you. A favor?" "Yeah? What is that?" Could you please not tell anyone else about me? I'm kind of supposed to be a secret." "Sure. I won't tell anyone about you. I really got to get going now. Sorry. It's getting late. Goodbye." He turned down the path and began to walk. "See you tomorrow," she called. "Goodbye. Hey, wait. I never got your name." "It's Jake," he called back. "Jake Darren." He turned around a bend in the road and left her view. For a long while, Susan remained where she sat, in full view of anyone who might happen to stroll past that spot. Eventually, she stopped daydreaming and headed home. That night, as she slept in her comfortable bed, she dreamt of her new friend. It was the first kid of her own age group she'd ever met. She hoped he'd still like her when he got to know her better. The future seemed so uncertain, but she had high hopes for tomorrow. It could be the beginning of her first real friendship. She sighed with contentness and drifted off into another dream. "Jake? Jake, answer me. I asked you where you were going." "Into the forest, Mom. I just want to explore a little. I told you last night I'd be going, didn't I?" "Okay, just promise me you'll stay away from that fenced area. If you go and hurt yourself again, then you're not going back. Am I clear?" "Yes, Mother. I'll be more careful this time. I promise." Jake waved to his mom and started off on his bike. When he told her that he'd accidentally tripped and stumbled into an electrified fence, she'd been mightily upset. He could understand, though. Since his dad had died, his mom had been especially protective over him, often forbidding him to join his friends in what she termed dangerous activities. It was her idea to move to Barton, widely considered to be one of the safest towns in the country. despite his ceaseless protests. Now he was stuck here in an unfamiliar town, attending an unappealing high school. As far as he was concerned, there was only one reason to stay. Susie. Jake couldn't contain his curiosity much longer. The 100-foot girl who'd saved his life, only to scare him half to death afterwards, was all he could think about. Last night he surfed the internet, trying to find some news article or story about her, but he found nothing. It was as if she didn't exist. He pedaled harder, speeding along the dirt track, anxious to reach his destination. When he got to the spot where he'd last seen her, she wasn't there. He looked at his watch. 1 minute before noon. He felt like calling her name, but then remembered that she told him to keep her existence secret. There might not be anyone spying on him right now, but then again, there might. He parked his bike beneath some trees, but before he could turn around, he was suddenly lifted from the ground. Large cylindrical objects curled around his body and enveloped him from his shoulders downwards. Another large object came down over his head and covered him. He grasped around him, trying to find something to hold on to as he rose higher and higher above the ground. Abruptly, he stopped moving upwards, and he heard a mighty, resonant, though distinctly girlish voice say, "Guess who?" "Hey, let me go!" he yelled, and Susie lifted her hand. Jake was still squirming in her grip, and she dropped him into her other hand. Disoriented, he grabbed her thumb for support and held on with all his strength. "Don't tell me you're scared of heights," she laughed. "I mean, it may be a long way down, but you're safe in my hands, Jake. I'm not letting my only friend fall to his death, so you can relax." Still clinging to her thumb, he looked up at her. It was the first time he'd been this close to her, and the sight overwhelmed him. Her cute-looking face was easily twice his height. She ran her fingers through her luscious red hair, and Jake wondered what it would feel like if he did the same. Then he gazed down at her chest, her tight green blouse covering her gigantic breasts. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked. "You look very pale. I hope I didn't scare you." No, I'm fine," he said, snapping out of his daze. "It's just, well, all this is a little much to take in." Susie felt relieved. She was anxious not to upset her little friend. It wouldn't do to scare him away before they've gotten to know each other. Then she realized she was still standing next to the fence, out in the open. She turned and headed towards the cabin, following the path she'd made through the forest, while being careful not to let Jake fall or get hurt. While she walked, she told him the story of her life, or at least all the essential parts, since she could sense his curiosity. He tried to listen, still being unnerved by the experience of being carried around like a little bug. "So that's basically it," she said as they arrived to her home. "Now you know why you can't tell anyone about me. My dad is a well-respected man, and one of the wealthiest men in the state. If people found out he's got a daughter who's, a giant, well, I don't think he'd be very well thought of anymore." She sat down at the kitchen table. It was now covered with a blue tablecloth, and she sat Jake down on it. He stood and stared around him, not sure what he should do. "Well, sit down," she said. "There's no need to stand there so awkwardly. Just relax. This is your home too now." My home," he stammered. You mean you're gonna keep me here?" She stared at him, then burst out with laughter. He sat down, blushing, not at all at ease. "No, you silly. I mean, you're welcome to visit here any time you'd like. Unless you want me to keep you here. I'm sure that could be arranged." She grinned and poked him in the stomach. "I bet there's a lot of places where I could hide you, and no one could ever find you. After all, you are really, really tiny." She laughed again, and this time he laughed with her. He knew she was only teasing him. Now, how about I get you something to drink? You look as if you need it. Oh, yes, please. She fished around the cupboard and brought out 2 massive jars. She placed them on the table, and Jake stared in astonishment. One contained what seemed to be thousands upon thousands of apples. The other contained an even greater number of pears. There seemed to be enough to feed him for a year. Please, take as many as you like, she offered. And don't worry, I have lots more. Thanks. That's really a lot of apples. Yeah, it's at least enough for a couple of days. She rummaged around in a little fridge, which was built into the wall. Oh no, I'm all out of juice. Sorry, it looks like you'll have to make do with water. Hope that's okay. Water will be great, thanks. She filled a 13-foot glass and placed it before him. She then dipped a teaspoon into it and held it at Jake's level. He looked at it. There had to be at least several gallons of water in it. I'm sorry if this seems weird, she said, but I don't have any glasses your size. Maybe I could ask Dad for some, but then I guess I'll have to tell him about you, so it's no problem, really. He took a sip from the spoon and found the water to be icy cold. To be honest, he continued, I almost feel like I'm in a fairy tale or something. Everything's just so overwhelming and exciting. I mean, I can't imagine what it must be like to be so huge and strong like you. She smiled. And I can't imagine what it's like just to be normal. Susie reached in the apple jar and took out a handful. Picking out one from the bunch, she gave it to Jake. Then she popped the remaining couple hundred apples into her mouth. He watched flabbergasted as she instantly devoured what was, to him, several months' worth of food. So, he said, trying to get his wits back. What he'd just seen and had quite taken away his appetite. Do you only eat fruits and stuff? That sounds a little boring to me. Well, I have all sorts of fruits and vegetables to choose from. Every week the food company sends a different menu, so to speak. I also have bread and milk, of course. No meat, though. Although, when I look at a scrumptious little fellow like you, I do feel rather tempted to try some. Jake gave a nervous laugh. The way she looked at him, like a cat looking at a mouse it had caught, had made him wonder whether or not she was joking. As he was wondering what to say, she grabbed him by his shirt and lifted him to her face. No sense in wondering when there's only one way to find out. She licked her lips, and to his horror, began lowering him into her open mouth. Her gleaming white teeth came closer and closer, until they closed in on his waist. At this point, he began to struggle. No, no, please! Please don't eat me! Oh God, please! To his great relief, she opened her mouth and pulled him out. She dropped him into her open hand. As he tried to get to his feet, she began laughing again. That's not funny, he shouted, but she kept on laughing. He suddenly felt rather foolish. Of course she was only pretending to eat him. If she had really wanted to do so, she'd have done it already. He sat down in her hand, facing away from her, so that she couldn't see how humiliated he felt. Susie stopped laughing and apologized. She didn't know how to behave when it came to entertaining friends, she said, because she never had a friend. She brought Jake closer to her body and hugged him. He grabbed at her blouse, feeling the warmth of her body through the fabric. Then he realized he was grabbing her breast and recoiled immediately in embarrassment. But she just held him tighter, until he can feel the heartbeat resonating from deep within her chest. Susie sat down on her bed and placed Jake carefully on her pillow. Then she slowly lay down on her stomach, resting her chin on her arms. She regarded the tiny man beneath her. "Jake," she began, "you're probably wondering why I'm so eager to have you here. You see, I've dreamt for years about what it must be like to not be the biggest thing that ever walked the earth. I'd like nothing better than to be an ordinary, everyday 5'6" girl. My dad spent millions on medical research trying to find a cure. You have no idea what it's been like living up here all alone, knowing that you'll never, ever be able to live a happy, normal life. In fact, before you came along, I've never even met someone who was almost the same age as me. So if you think this is exciting for you, well, it's 10 times more exciting for me." Jake looked up at her. Though he had been friends with many girls and had even dated one a few months ago, he somehow felt closer to this girl than any of them. Her presence filled his field of vision, and her scent in his lungs. His heart began beating faster, and he was aware that he was sweating. Mustering his strength to look her directly in the eyes, he asked, "What is it you want from me?" Susie moved back a bit. Clearly she was intimidating her little friend, and she decided to give him more room. Sitting upright, she crossed her legs. Then she lifted Jake and placed him on her knee. "Tell me, Jake," she said. "Tell me all about you and your life. Tell me what it's like to be normal." Not a minute went by where Jake didn't wish he could skip school and go see Susie. That Sunday afternoon where he'd been taken to a remote cabin and spent hours talking to her had already begun to feel like a distant memory. He told her he'd like to visit her every day to her great delight, but it just wasn't possible. They both had their studies to attend to, and it might also be too risky if he came to see her every day. Sooner or later, people might suspect that something strange was going on. They could both get into serious trouble, and he didn't think she deserved that. So she told him to come back early next Saturday morning. Just as expected, the days went by excruciatingly slow. For the most part, he spent his time in class daydreaming about Susie, while trying to pay attention to what the teachers were saying. He also tried to steer clear of Billy and his gang. He still hadn't told anyone the truth about what had happened that day. Billy was very popular at school, plus his dad was the chief of police, so it seemed like he could get away with anything he wanted. Nobody would believe Jake's version of the story, so he kept quiet and tried to forget about it. Wednesday morning came, and the classes felt even longer than usual. Jake was daydreaming again, staring off into the distance, oblivious to his classmates' stares, when the harsh teacher's voice took him back to reality. "Jake Darren, how many times do I have to tell you to pay attention?" I'm sorry, Miss Stewart. I'm really listening. I'm trying, really." "What has gotten into you?" Miss Stewart asked. "You used to be the best listener in class, Jake." "He's in love," somebody shouted, and the whole class began to laugh. Jake looked around furiously, trying to find out who said that. "No, I'm not. I'm not in love. That's a lie." The laughing continued, and to Jake's horror, he saw Billy staring back at him, an evil look in his eyes. If only the day was over already, he wished to himself. "Okay, class, that's enough," the teacher ordered. "And Jake, whatever it is that's bothering you, I suggest you get over it quickly. Next week is test week, and I expect you to do very well. You understand?" He nodded, and Miss Stewart went back to teaching. Or at least she would have, but she couldn't resist having one more go at Jake. "After all," she said, "we certainly don't want your secret girlfriend to think you're an underachiever, now do we?" The room erupted with laughter again, and Jake began counting the seconds of time left until he could escape this miserable place. Susie wandered through the field of tall grass, She wondered how she got there and why the grass was so tall. It didn't feel right, but she accepted it eventually and kept on walking. Then in the distance, silhouetted against the setting sun, she saw him. She began walking faster, desperate to reach him. Oh, it was definitely him. She was sure of it. Within moments, she was standing before him, looking up into his face. He reached out to her and took hold of her, and she embraced him. As their faces approached one another, she heard him whisper, "I love you, Susie. I love you, Jake," she replied, and he leaned in forward to kiss her. But then a cold wind blew across them, and he vanished, and she stood alone in the field of grass. Susie awoke with a start. A cold breeze blew in through the window, which she forgot to close. She got up to close it, pausing for a moment to gaze into the darkness outside. Then she climbed back into bed, but it was impossible to fall asleep now. A strange feeling had filled her in the dream, but now it was gone, and she suddenly felt empty and alone. Am I really in love with him? She said to herself. No, it can't be. It was just a dream. Nothing more. But denying that her feelings existed didn't make them go away. She hugged her pillow tightly and tried to remember what being held by him had felt like. Such a strange feeling, one that she could never really experience in real life, not while she was big as this. In the darkness, she began to cry softly. Oh, Jake. If only you knew how I really felt about you. But you can't know. No one can ever know. Oh, God, why is this happening to me? Why can't I just be happy like everyone else? She cried and cried until she had no more tears left. She hadn't felt this heartbroken since her father had told her about her mother's death. Back then, at least, she had someone to talk to, someone to share the pain with. Now there was no one who could help, no one who could understand how she felt. She was going to have to face this herself. Susie sat upright in bed and felt for her box of tissues. She blew her nose and dried her tears, and felt ashamed for acting so pathetic. It's all right, she told herself. You've been through much worse before. Pull yourself together, Susie. Tomorrow you'll get to see him again, and you'll have a great time. Then she got an idea. Tomorrow when Jake arrives, she'll take him for a picnic in the woods. We'll go to that little stream at the foot of the hill. He'll love it. I'm sure he will. Once her mind had calmed down, she lay down again. She pulled her blanket over herself, telling herself once again that everything will be all right. After all, she was 100-foot tall, amazingly powerful giantess. She had no reason to be afraid of anything. With all her strength, she could do anything she wanted. Jake arose early on Saturday morning, hurriedly ate some breakfast, left his still sleeping mother a note, and was off. The sky was cloudless. He could tell it was going to be a lovely day. He wondered what he and Susie were going to do today, and if she had anything specific planned. Whatever it was, he was sure he'd enjoy it. Over the past week, he'd grow more and more obsessed with her, and spending time with her again was sure to be a blast. He had parked his bike and had reached the fence before he realized he was again too early, this time by 15 minutes. He began pacing around, now and then glancing at the forest for signs of his gigantic friend. He noticed how she'd already made a substantial path through the dense trees, having pushed them aside as if they were nothing but grass. He had not waited 2 minutes, though, when he heard voices approaching, and a moment later their owners came into view around the bend. I told you we'd find him here. There's something strange going on here, that's for sure. Jake watched in dismay as the same 4 kids he'd been here with last Saturday came towards him. Billy's bike skidded to a halt less than 2 feet from him, showering him with dust. Frank and Arthur were close behind, while Linda remained in the background. She looked like she didn't really want to be here, but clearly she had to go wherever Billy went. Came back for more, did you? Billy laughed, grabbing Jake's shoulder. Jake shook him off and backed away. It was too late to run now, so he'd have to face them. What do you want, Billy? He said defiantly. I thought you didn't want me hanging out with you, so what the hell's your problem? The boys just laughed at him. By now they had him surrounded. Jake was no weakling, but he knew he didn't stand a chance against the 3 of them. Oh, you want us to leave, is that it? Billy asked. Why don't you tell us what you're doing here? Then maybe I'll consider it. That's none of your business. Bullshit, Billy spat at him. You're up to something here. Tell me what it is or I'll break your neck. Jake wished he hadn't arrived this early. He also wished he could warn Susie not to come here now, but that was impossible. Okay, fine, I'll tell you, he said, trying to buy some time. I found a way inside, so I came back to look around. Happy now? What's inside the fence that's so interesting, huh? That's where his girlfriend lives, said Arthur, and he and Frank began to laugh. Jake felt a horrifying feeling inside him. They couldn't know about Susie, could they? Oh yeah, that's right. Old Jake's got himself a secret girlfriend. So what's she like, huh? Is she hot? I mean, she lives in a fucking forest. She's gotta be pretty wild, right? Jake decided he had enough. He glanced at his watch. Susie should have shown up by now. He hoped she'd seen what had happened and decided to stay away. If Billy and the others found out about her, it was pretty much over for her, and him as well. But he still had to escape this present situation. They were still busy laughing at him when he charged full force at Billy and knocked him aside. But he wasn't quick enough. Billy recovered instantly, drew out his knife, and stabbed Jake in the shoulder as he ran past. He stumbled and fell to the ground, crying out in pain. The others, even Linda, came running up to him. They stood over him as if when he tried to scramble away, and grabbed him by his shirt collar. I don't remember saying you could leave, Billy snarled. He punched Jake on the shoulder, in the same spot where the knife had struck him. Jake stifled a cry. He wanted to fight with all his strength, but he couldn't see how he could possibly win. So when's this girlfriend of yours supposed to show up? She's not my girlfriend. Jake couldn't think straight. He wanted to tell them the truth, just so they'd leave him alone. But then, when he was on the brink of completely giving up completely and letting them do what they want to him, he saw someone emerging from within the woods. He smiled and got to his feet, shakily. Actually, he said, she's just arrived. So why don't you ask her yourself?